Hi everyone, my name is Mark from the Vegan Mooncat. If it's your first time here, if you could please hit subscribe so you get notified of future videos. Also, you can follow me on Instagram at the Vegan Mooncat. Today, I'll be sharing my top 5 tips on how you can succeed on a whole foods vegan diet and avoid the pitfalls that can make many people give up before they've even got started. Tip number 1, make sure you're eating enough calories. A lot of the time when people start on a whole foods vegan diet, the number one mistake that I've seen is they don't eat enough calories. So once you've removed the high-calorie animal products from your food, you need to be replacing those with adequate calories from the plant kingdom. So nuts, seeds, beans, all the higher calorie plant foods that you can get to make sure that you're not in a calorie deficit. This is definitely one of the reasons why people starting on a whole foods vegan diet can fail. I highly recommend that you get yourself a calorie counting app for the first few weeks to ensure that you're getting enough calories and nutrition so you don't fall into this pitfall. Tip 2, eat foods that you really enjoy. Now this may sound like a no-brainer, like of course I'm going to eat food that I enjoy, why would I do anything else? So it can feel quite overwhelming about what you should now be eating on a whole foods vegan diet. I mean, you were pretty familiar with what you used to eat because you've eaten that your whole life, but what do you do now that you're not eating those products anymore? I would highly recommend that initially you just stay with the kinds of meals that you've always enjoyed and just take the animals out and replace them with whole plant foods instead. An example of this is I really enjoy Indian food, so when I first went on a whole foods vegan diet, one of the first dishes I made was one of my favourite curries. So I was still getting the same flavour experience of the dish that I really enjoyed because I'm still using the same herbs and the same spices and all the other ingredients, just changing out the animal products for some whole plant food ones. Other than that, I'm getting the same thing I'd always enjoyed. So while it is great to try new foods, I would highly recommend when you first go vegan, try to veganize the dishes that you used to enjoy so you don't feel like you're missing out and you're giving up something to make this big change. Remember, only eat food that you enjoy. Tip number 3, communication. So unless you're extremely lucky, the likelihood of all your family and friends going on a whole foods vegan diet at the same time as you is pretty minimal, to be honest. And this in itself can be extremely isolating. One of the things that really struck me when I first went on a whole foods vegan diet is everyone talks about food. They talk about what they're having for breakfast, what they're going to have for lunch, what they're going to eat on the night out, what they're going to eat when they visit their mum. It's just everywhere. So I now realise that talking about food with my non-vegan friends and family had become a lot more difficult than it used to be. And because veganism isn't everywhere yet, it can be very difficult to find people in your local area that you can bounce ideas off for meals and get advice from if you're coming across a problem and you want to discuss it, and it can be very isolating. Connect with people who've been on a whole foods vegan diet for longer than you have to remove some of that isolation, to bring back people that you can bounce ideas off and get advice from should you run into any issues. These are the types of people that you now need to talk to make sure that you don't set yourself up for failure. I 100% believe that connecting with the broader vegan community, sharing ideas, helping each other, this is absolutely key to being successful on a whole foods vegan diet. Don't be alone. Tip 4, get help. If you're experiencing any physical or mental issues while on a whole foods vegan diet, don't just give up. Ask the advice of a medical professional or people who've been on a whole foods vegan diet for longer who might be able to offer some advice. So when switching from the typical diet that most people follow, full of processed foods and animal products, when you first go whole foods vegan, you can encounter a couple of different issues. Don't let these be the things that make you stop. An issue that can be quite common when you first go on a whole foods vegan diet is bloating. Now this can be very uncomfortable and can make you think that you need to go back to the way you used to eat. This could be caused by many different things, and while I do advise you seek help from a professional if you do come across any issues at all, this is a very common issue when first going vegan, and it's normally caused by the fact that your previous diet had absolutely no fibre compared to what you're eating now. Plant foods are so rich in fibre, and most people before they go whole foods vegan have a very low fibre intake. So when they up the fibre intake to such a high level, it can initially cause some bloating and discomfort, which can be easily fixed. One of the problems that was causing me bloating was beans. I think this is quite common for a lot of new vegans. What I would recommend initially, if you are having issues, just have a small amount of beans. They're extremely healthful, so make sure you keep them in your diet, and then just build up gradually over a few weeks or a couple of months higher and higher until you can tolerate them. You can also substitute beans initially for maybe a slightly more processed version such as tempeh or tofu, which are definitely a lot easier on the gut. If you do experience any discomfort or any issues at all when going on a whole foods vegan diet, just remember you won't be the first person to experience these, and I highly recommend you just reach out to a health professional or somebody with more experience on a whole foods vegan diet. They will definitely be able to offer some advice and hopefully alleviate your symptoms as soon as possible so you can carry on this very healthful way of eating. Tip number 5. The animals. I've been overweight my entire life and I've tried diet after diet after diet, and every single time I've lost some weight, but then I've reverted back to my old ways and put all the weight back on plus more. If you're on a whole foods vegan diet and you're treating it just as that, a diet, then it can be easier to give up in the long term. As an example, if you're out with friends and family and they're eating something that you used to eat but you no longer eat because you're on a whole foods vegan diet, but then you think, oh well, it won't hurt just once, and you eat it and then you beat yourself up about it, and then you may be more likely to give up the whole foods vegan diet because you think, oh well, I've started eating again, I might as well carry on. In my opinion, one of the best ways to ensure that you stay on a whole foods vegan diet is to make a connection with the animals. That way you realize that your food choices have implications for others other than just yourself. If you've ever listened to an ex-vegan or somebody who used to be on a plant-based diet, one of the words that always gets repeated is me. I couldn't do this. It wasn't any good for me. I'm on my own personal journey. I'm doing this. It didn't suit me for these reasons. It's always just about them. They never made the connection with the animals, which made it so much easier to go back to how they used to be. Even though it can be extremely difficult to watch, I highly recommend you go online and you look at the suffering and the plight of the animals. This will only bolster your resolve to stay on a whole foods vegan diet because you're no longer just considering yourself. You've got to consider them as well. They're suffering and they need you to care. So once you've started to not just consider yourself, but also someone else, in this case the animals, it makes it extremely difficult to make poor choices. That time you're out with friends and they're eating a burger, you're no longer thinking, oh, it won't harm just once, because it is going to harm. You've opened your eyes, you've seen the plight of the animals, the cows and the pigs and the chickens, and you no longer see it as food, which makes it extremely difficult to go back to where you were. This, in my opinion, is the difference between people who stay on a whole foods vegan diet for the long haul and people who give up early on. Once you realize that your food choices don't just affect your own health, but they affect the health of the entire planet and everyone who lives on it, then it's much easier to make the right choice. That concludes my 5 top tips for being a whole foods vegan for the long haul. If you've enjoyed this video, please hit subscribe and also follow me on Instagram at @VeganMoonCat for daily updates about what I'm doing and what I'm eating. And I'll see you next time.